Harrison Cole cinched the saddle on his bay mare as dawn broke over the Montana rangeland. His foreman, Dutch, leaned against the fence post watching with the same tired expression he wore every 6 weeks. "That's 80 miles round trip, boss," Dutch said. "Grant's Forge is 3 miles down the road." Cole checked the saddlebags without looking up. "A crippled man can't do proper work. I need someone who can handle my horses." "Grant's been shoeing horses for 5 years since the accident." "Out of pity," Cole said flatly. "People feel sorry for him. That doesn't make him competent." Dutch spat into the dust but said nothing more. The argument was old and settled. Cole swung into the saddle, his jaw set in that familiar line of certainty. Some men bent with the wind. Harrison Cole prided himself on being oak, not willow. The ride into town took him past Grant's Forge on the edge of his property. Smoke already rose from the chimney. Catching the morning light, the ring of hammer on anvil carried across the still air, steady and sure. A young man swept the entrance, but pausing to wave at a passing neighbor. Cole turned his face away. He'd drawn his line 5 years ago when Thomas Grant came back from that mining accident with a twisted hand and a leg that wouldn't straighten. A man's body was his tool in this country. Break the tool. You broke the man. The morning was beautiful. Golden light washing over his sprawling acreage. Prime stallions grazed in the near pasture. His hired hands were already at work mending fence. Everything in its place. Everything as it should be. Standards mattered. A man had to draw lines somewhere. Cole touched his heels to the mare's flanks and headed for the long road to town. 40 miles there. 40 miles back. And every mile justified. He'd been doing this twice a month for 5 years. Other ranchers had followed his lead. They understood quality. Understood that some things couldn't be compromised. The forge grew smaller behind him. The hammer's rhythm faded into distance. Cole didn't look back. "Standards," he said to the mare. "That's what separates us from chaos." The mare flicked her ears but kept walking. The road stretched ahead, familiar and certain. Cole settled into the saddle, already thinking about the cattle drive coming up next week. His prize stallion would need fresh shoes for the mountain trails. Good thing he was heading to a proper blacksmith. Behind him, smoke continued rising from Grant's chimney. The young apprentice went back to sweeping. The hammer rang steady against the anvil. None of it mattered to Harrison Cole. His mind was made up. Had been for 5 years, and nothing was going to change it. The autumn cattle drive started well. 2 days in, 20 miles from the summer range. Cole's prize stallion threw a shoe on rocky ground. The metallic crack echoed across the high country. Cole dismounted immediately, running his hand down the stallion's foreleg. The animal shifted its weight, favoring the unshod hoof. Without protection, the hoof would crack and splinter on these trails. His trail boss, Martinez, rode up and dismounted. He examined the hoof in silence, then straightened. "Nearest forge is Grant's, about 18 miles back. We'll manage without," Cole said. "No, sir, we won't." Martinez met his eyes. "This stallion's your best cutting horse. You need him for the work ahead. That hoof won't last 2 days unshod on this terrain." Cole stared at the mountains ahead. The whole drive depended on moving the herd through the passes before the weather turned. He needed every good horse he had. The stallion was essential. "The smith in town just shot him 2 weeks ago," Cole said. "And here we are anyway." Martinez's tone was neutral, but his meaning clear. "Horse doesn't care about our pride. Boss just needs a shoe." The other hands had stopped, watching. They all knew about Cole's refusal to use Grant's Forge. Some agreed with him. Others thought he was stubborn. None of them would say so to his face. Cole felt the weight of their attention. He'd made his position public for 5 years, rode 40 miles past Grant's Forge every time he needed work done, told anyone who'd listen that a crippled blacksmith couldn't be trusted with quality horses. Now, circumstances had cornered him. The stallion needed a shoe. Grant's Forge was the only option. Every hand on this drive would know where he'd gone. "We turn back," Cole said finally. "Get this horse shod. Rest of you keep the herd moving slow. We'll catch up by tomorrow evening." Martinez nodded and swung back into his saddle. The other hands resumed their positions. Cole mounted carefully, keeping weight off the stallion's damaged side. The animal walked gingerly, each step on hard ground a risk. 18 miles back to Grant's forge, the humiliation sat heavy in Cole's chest. He'd be seen walking into that shop after 5 years of public disdain. Grant would know he'd come because he had no choice. "One time won't change anything," Cole muttered. "Soon as we're back, I'll get him properly shod in town." The stallion limped forward. The mountains rose behind them. Cole turned his back on the herd and the drive and his pride, riding toward the one place he'd sworn never to go. The ride gave Cole too much time to think. Memories surfaced like stones in a creek bed, unavoidable once you looked for them. 5 years ago, the mine cave-in. Thomas Grant pulled from the rubble with his left leg crushed and his right hand twisted at angles that made men look away. Cole remembered standing with other townsmen outside the doctor's office, everyone thinking the same thing. "Poor bastard," someone had said. "His working days are done." Cole had nodded. It seemed obvious. A blacksmith needed strength, needed 2 good hands and steady legs. Grant had been one of the best before the accident. After he'd be lucky to sweep floors. Then Grant's wife left. Couldn't handle watching her husband struggle. Couldn't see past the twisted body to the man inside. The town pitied Grant even more. Some people brought charity meals. Others offered make-work jobs out of kindness. But Grant kept his forge. Word got around that he was still shoeing horses. Still taking work. Cole dismissed it as compensation. People feeling sorry for a broken man. When Cole needed smithing done, he started riding to the next town, made a point of it. Standards mattered. Other ranchers noticed. Some followed Cole's lead. After all, Harrison Cole was successful to own the largest ranch in the territory. If he didn't trust Grant's work, maybe there was something to it. Cole had never asked himself if he was right. He'd just decided, and that was that. Now the forge appeared ahead, smoke rising from the chimney. Cole's stomach tightened. The stallion sensed his tension and shifted uneasily. Cole steadied the animal with practiced hands, though his own nerves were harder to calm. He dismounted in the yard. The forge was neat, well-maintained. Tools hung in careful order on the walls visible through the open doors. The sound of work carried from inside, someone hammering with steady rhythm. Cole led the stallion forward, stepped from bright sunlight into the dimmer interior. His eyes adjusted slowly, finding the man at the anvil. Thomas Grant looked up. He was leaner than Cole remembered, weathered by pain and time. His left leg was visibly stiff, his right hand curled at an unnatural angle, but his eyes were steady and clear. "Mr. Cole," Grant said evenly, "I wondered when you'd come." No bitterness in his voice, no triumph, just quiet acknowledgement of inevitability, as if he'd always known Cole's pride would eventually meet necessity. Cole's prepared words died in his throat. He stood in the doorway, leading a lame horse, coming to a man he'd publicly dismissed for 5 years. The shame was acute and undeniable. "My stallion threw a shoe," Cole finally said. "I'm in the middle of a drive. I need work done quickly." Grant nodded once. He set down his hammer and limped toward them, his gait hitching but purposeful. "Let's have a look then." Cole watched him approach. This man he'd written off as broken and useless, still working, still standing, still here despite everything Cole's prejudice had cost him. The forge's heat pressed against Cole's back. The familiar smell of coal smoke and hot iron filled his lungs. He'd stepped into Grant's world now, into the domain of the man he'd dismissed. There was no retreat from this moment, no way to undo the choice that circumstances had forced. Grant reached for the stallion's bridle. His twisted hand moved with unexpected sureness. The horse, notorious for its temperament, stood quietly under his touch. "Come on then," Grant said gently to the animal. "Let's see what we're working with." Grant ran his curled hand down the stallion's foreleg with surprising gentleness. The horse, which fought most farriers, stood perfectly still. Grant's fingers found the problem immediately, testing the hoof's edges, checking for cracks. "What work do you need from this horse?" Grant asked. The question surprised Cole. "What does that matter?" "Matters everything." Grant straightened, his stiff leg making the movement awkward but functional. Trail work's different from ranch work. Mountain terrain needs different shoeing than flatland. Tell me what you're asking of him." Cole hesitated, then answered. "Cattle drive through the high passes, cutting work with the herd, rocky ground, steep grades, another 3 weeks minimum." Grant nodded, and already moving toward his tools. "And how soon do you need him ready?" "I need to catch up to my herd by tomorrow evening." "That's doable." Grant selected a shoe from his stock, held it up to check the curve, then set it aside. He pulled a different one, examined it more carefully. "This one's closer. I'll adjust it proper." Cole watched, expecting fumbling or struggle. Instead, he saw adaptation. Grant used specialized tongs he could grip despite his curled fingers. The anvil sat lower than standard height, allowing him to work without straining his stiff leg. When he lifted the hammer, he used body weight and angle rather than raw arm strength. The first strike rang true, the second, the third, each blow placed with precision. Shaping the iron with careful intention, Grant worked methodically, testing the curve, heating it again, making minute adjustments. The forge was immaculately organized. Every tool had its place, positioned for Grant's modified reach. Tongs hung at specific heights. The coal pile sat within easy access. Even the water barrel was placed to minimize unnecessary movement. "You've changed things," Cole said. Unable to hide his surprise, Grant didn't pause in his work. "Had to. The old ways didn't work anymore." "But you kept working." "What else was I going to do?" Grant plunged the shoe into water. Steam hissed upward. "Man's got to eat, got to have purpose. Lying down and dying didn't appeal to me." Cole watched the steam rise and dissipate. He thought about his assumptions, his certainty that Grant would fail. 5 years of being wrong, and he'd never questioned it once. Grant pulled the shoe from the water, tested its temperature with his fingertips, then examined the curve with professional attention. Not good enough yet. Back into the fire it went. "First year after the accident nearly broke me," Grant said quietly. "Working the bellows. Tried to work the old way. Couldn't grip the tools right. Couldn't stand long enough. Everything hurt, and nothing worked." He pulled the glowing iron out again. The hammer rang against it, adjusting the curve with mathematical precision. "Almost gave up. Then I realized I was trying to be who I was, instead of who I am now." The words hung in the heated air. Cole felt them settle somewhere deep, where certainty had lived unchallenged for too long. Grant worked in silence for several minutes, shaping and testing. When he finally plunged the shoe into water again, the curve was perfect. He held it up to the light, checking every angle. "Pain teaches creativity," Grant said. "I can't work as fast as I used to, but I can work more carefully. Every strike matters more when you can't afford wasted motion." He moved to the stallion, testing the fit against the hoof. The horse stood quiet, trusting. Grant made one more minor adjustment, then nodded with satisfaction. "Better than what you had before," Grant said. "This'll hold through your whole drive and then some." Cole watched him work, seeing not disability but mastery. Different methods, same quality, maybe better quality, earned through necessity and innovation. Everything he'd assumed about this man was crumbling with each precise hammer strike. Grant positioned the shoe and began nailing it in place. His twisted hand held the nail with unexpected dexterity. Each strike of the hammer was measured, controlled. The stallion didn't even flinch. "How'd you learn to work like this?" Cole asked. The question came out genuinely curious, his defensive pride momentarily forgotten. Grant finished securing one nail before answering. "Trial and error. Mostly. Lots of error at first." He selected another nail, positioned it carefully, tried 100 different grips before I found ones that worked, adjusted my anvil height 6 times before I got it right. The hammer struck true, another nail seated perfectly. My hand can't grip like it used to, so I had to rethink leverage. My leg can't support me through 12-hour days, so I had to get more efficient. Every limitation forced me to understand my craft better. Cole leaned against a support post. Watching closely, the work was mesmerizing in its precision. Grant's movements had an economy to them. Nothing wasted, everything purposeful. "Other smiths rely on strength," Grant continued. working steadily. I have to rely on understanding, know the metal better, know the horse's anatomy more precisely, understand weight distribution and balance. He tapped the last nail into place. Can't power through problems anymore. Gotta think through them instead. He straightened, testing his work with careful fingers. Satisfied, he moved to the other side of the horse. The stallion shifted its weight automatically, cooperating in ways it never did with other farriers. You've got away with him. Cole observed. Patience, Grant said simply. When you can't force things, you learn patience, or horses respond to that. He began filing the hoof, smoothing the edges where the shoe met the wall. Most farriers rush. I can't rush. So the horses get time to adjust. Turns out they prefer it. The rasp worked steadily, creating a smooth transition. Grant checked his work from multiple angles, ensuring the fit was exact. This was craftsmanship of the highest order. Cole realized, not despite the disability, but somehow because of it. I train young men now, Grant said, almost conversationally. Boys that other trades won't take, ones with injuries, disabilities, things that make folks think they're not worth the trouble. Cole felt something shift in his chest. Why? Grant looked up, meeting his eyes directly. Because everyone has ability, just sometimes in unexpected ways. He returned to his work. Most people never have to find their unexpected ways. They can coast on the obvious ones. But some of us, we get forced to dig deeper, find strengths we didn't know we had. He heated the iron for the second shoe, the forge fire casting orange light across his weathered face. Had a boy come to me last year. Lost 3 fingers in a sawmill accident. Everyone said he was done with skilled work, but he's got steady hands and a good eye. Learning fine ironwork now. Does detail pieces I couldn't manage with 10 perfect fingers. The iron glowed hot. Grant pulled it from the fire and began shaping it with that same precise rhythm. Each hammer strike rang true, the metal bent to his will. Transformed by heat and pressure and understanding, another boy, deaf since scarlet fever, came to me after being turned away from carpentry, harness making, 3 other trades. Grant tested the curve, found it wanting, heated it again. Communication's different with him, but his hands are more patient than anyone I've ever trained. Does decorative work that sells in Helena, Butte, places where people pay premium prices. Cole listened, his throat tight. 5 years he'd avoided this forge. 5 years of assuming Grant was finished, broken, pitiable. But the man in front of him had built something remarkable from devastation. Grant plunged the completed shoe into water. The violent hiss echoed through the forge. Steam rose like conscience made visible, like pride being quenched. Every strike matters, Grant said quietly, pulling the cooled shoe from the water. Every choice, every moment, can't waste any of it. He held the shoe up to the light, checking it from every angle. Perfect. He moved back to the stallion, beginning the process again. The horse stood calm, trusting the hands that worked with such careful attention. Cole watched the steam dissipate into nothing. He thought about his own choices, his own careful arrangement of the world according to his certainties. What had his certainty built? What had Grant's necessity created? The comparison was uncomfortable and necessary. The forge door opened, bringing cooler air and a young man carrying supplies. He was perhaps 19, with the careful awareness of someone navigating a world built for different senses. James, Grant said, then signed something with his free hand. The young man nodded, set down his load, and signed back. Mr. Cole, this is James, Grant said, returning to his work. Been with me near about 2 years now. Cole nodded at the young man, who smiled politely but didn't speak. He moved to a workbench in the corner and began organizing pieces of decorative ironwork, his movements precise and economical. Deaf since he was 12, Grant explained, positioning the second shoe on the stallion's hoof. Scarlet fever took his hearing but left everything else intact. 3 trades turned him away before he came to me. They couldn't see past what he'd lost to what he still had. James pulled out a piece of ornamental iron, something delicate and complex. He examined it with complete focus, his fingers reading the metal surface the way others might read text. Then he selected tools and began working, shaping the iron with extraordinary care. Cole found himself drawn to watch. The young man's concentration was absolute. His hands moved with a sensitivity that seemed impossible, making adjustments so small they were barely visible. He was creating a decorative piece, flowers and vines in wrought iron, each petal perfectly formed. "He does work most hearing smiths can't manage," Grant said with evident pride. "His hands are more patient than mine ever were. Fingers that sensitive can feel variations in the metal that others miss. That piece he's working on is commissioned for a hotel in Helena. They're paying top dollar for it." The quality was undeniable. Cole had seen decorative ironwork in San Francisco, in Denver, in the finest establishments. James's work matched or exceeded it, and he was doing it in a small frontier forge, taught by a man others had written off as broken. "You've built something here," Cole said slowly, the full scope of what he'd missed finally becoming clear. You're not just surviving, you're creating opportunity." Grant tapped the final nail into place. "I give them a chance. They build their own skills." He straightened, testing the shoes' fit with professional scrutiny. "James there. He'll open his own forge someday, maybe in a bigger city where decorative work's in demand. Boy with the missing fingers. He's already getting private commissions. They don't need pity. They need someone to see what they can do instead of what they can't." The stallion stood perfectly balanced now, both front shoes replaced. Grant ran his hand down each leg, checking his work one final time. The horse remained calm, almost grateful. Cole watched James work, watched Grant's careful inspection, watched the forge operate as a place of genuine craftsmanship and opportunity. Not charity, not compensation, excellence. "How much business have you lost?" Cole asked quietly. "Because of people like me." Grant didn't answer immediately. He led the stallion forward a few steps, watching how it moved, ensuring the shoes were properly balanced. Satisfied, he tied the horse and turned to face Cole. "Hard to say exactly," Grant said. "Enough that I downsized plans, had to let go of dreams of expanding, of taking on more apprentices sooner." He shrugged, the gesture more philosophical than bitter. "But enough remains that I can train young men who need it. I count that sufficient." Cole felt the weight of that answer, not just the lost business, but the delayed opportunities. Young men who could have learned a trade earlier, found purpose sooner, if Grant had been able to expand his operation. All of it hindered by attitudes like Cole's, by prejudice masquerading as standards. "I rode 40 miles past your forge," Cole said, 12 times a year, for 5 years. "I know," Grant said simply, "for work that wasn't as good as yours." I suspected that might be the case. The admission hung between them. Cole thought of all those miles, all that wasted time, all that stubborn certainty. The absurdity of it struck him with physical force. He'd been a fool. And worse, his foolishness had hurt others. James finished his section of work and brought the piece to Grant for inspection. The two communicated through signs, Grant nodding approval and offering what looked like suggestions. James returned to his bench, pride evident in his posture. Cole saw the dynamic clearly now. This wasn't a charity operation. This was a master craftsman training the next generation, adapted for the reality they all faced. It was more honest, more valuable, more dignified than half the operations Cole had supported, and he'd avoided it for 5 years because he couldn't see past his own assumptions. Grant finished checking the stallion's shoes one final time, testing the balance and examining each nail. He walked the horse in a slow circle, watching its gait carefully. The animal moved smoothly, weight distributed evenly, no sign of favoring either side. "Better than what you had before," Grant said, handing the lead rope to Cole. "That'll hold through your drive and well past it." Cole took the rope, testing the horse's movement himself. The improvement was obvious. The stallion's stride was more confident, more balanced. The work was exceptional, visibly superior to what he'd gotten from the smith 40 miles away. He reached for his wallet, but hesitated. Pride warred with conscience, old certainty battling new understanding. Finally, the words came, quiet but necessary. "I've been a fool." Grant met his eyes, his expression unreadable. Lots of folks are. That's supposed to make me feel better. No, Grant said evenly. But it's the truth. Most people don't notice when they're wrong. Some notice but don't care. Few admit it. Cole paid for the work, counting out bills with hands that felt heavy. The transaction should have been simple, but it carried the weight of 5 years of error. Every dollar felt like acknowledgement of time wasted. Homage done. I influenced others, Cole said. Other ranchers followed my lead, avoided your forge because I did. I know. How much did that cost you? Grant considered the question carefully, in money. Probably enough to expand this place years ago, enough that James came to me later than he might have, same with others. He glanced at his apprentice, still working intently at his bench. But I had enough to keep going, to train the ones who found me. I built what I could with what I had. The generosity of that answer stung worse than anger would have. Grant wasn't minimizing the harm, but just refusing to let it define everything. He'd made something good despite the obstacles, including the obstacles Cole himself had created. Cole thought of his 40-mile journeys, undertaken with such self-righteous certainty. 80 miles round trip, 12 times a year, for 5 years. Nearly 5,000 miles traveled to avoid admitting he might be wrong. 5,000 miles of pride, stretching across the landscape like a monument to foolishness. And for what? Work that wasn't as good. Shoes that didn't last as long, all because he'd decided a man's worth was measured by his body's perfection instead of his mind's innovation or his hand's skill. I'd like to make this right, Cole said. Grant studied him. In the man's eyes, Cole saw neither forgiveness nor condemnation, just patient assessment. How you treat me tomorrow matters more than what you say today, Grant replied. Apologies are easy. Changed behavior is the real test. The challenge landed solid. Cole recognized truth when he heard it. Words were cheap. He'd built his entire prejudice on unexamined assumptions and convenient certainty. Undoing that damage would require more than one moment of contrition. You're right, Cole said. He checked the stallion's shoes himself, running his hand over Grant's work. Flawless craftsmanship. I'll bring my business here from now on. All of it. That's a start. What else? Grant limped to his workbench, the stiffness in his leg more pronounced after hours of work. He leaned against it, taking weight off the damaged limb. Tell the truth when people ask. Don't hide where you got your work done. Don't make it quiet. Cole understood. Grant wasn't asking for grand gestures. He was asking for honesty, for Cole to stop pretending, to acknowledge publicly what he'd admitted privately, to let his changed behavior speak where his past prejudice had spoken. I can do that, Cole said. James looked up from his work. Sensing something significant passing between the two men, Grant signed something to him. The young man smiled and returned to his iron flowers. The sun was setting when Cole led the stallion outside. The sky burned orange and red, shadows stretching long across the Montana grassland. He mounted carefully, the horse settling easily beneath him. Tomorrow, Grant said from the forge doorway. And every day after. That's what makes the difference. Cole nodded. He turned the stallion toward the high country where his herd waited. But he looked back once at the forge. Smoke rose from the chimney, catching the last light. Inside, James worked at his careful art. Grant returned to his anvil, to the work that pain had forced him to reimagine and master. Tomorrow, Cole said to himself, and every day after. He rode into the gathering dusk, toward the cattle drive and the men who'd be watching to see what he'd done, where he'd gone. Whether he'd finally admit what they probably already knew. The road ahead felt different now, lighter. Somehow, the weight of false certainty had lifted, leaving room for truth. The best iron, he thought, got tested by the hottest fire. Maybe the same was true for men. Cole caught up to the herd the next evening. His men looked at the stallion's fresh shoes but asked no questions. Word traveled anyway, the way it always did. By the time they completed the drive and returned to the ranch, everyone knew where Harrison Cole had gone. His foreman, Dutch, was the first to mention it. Heard Grant did good work on the stallion? Best I've ever seen, Cole said flatly. meeting his eyes. Better than what I've been getting in town. That right? That's right. Cole dismounted, running his hand down the stallion's legs one more time. 3 weeks of hard mountain work, and the shoes showed minimal wear. Going to be using him from now on for everything. Dutch nodded slowly. He'd been suggesting it for 5 years. Took some restraint not to say I told you so. Cole appreciated the restraint. Other ranchers heard about it over the following weeks. Some mentioned it casually, testing whether Cole would deflect or admit. He didn't hide it. Thomas Grant shod my prize stallion, he told anyone who asked. Held up through the whole drive without issue. I was wrong about his work. Wrong about him. The admissions cost him. Some men respected the honesty, saw it as strength to acknowledge error. Others saw weakness, a crack in Harrison Cole's legendary certainty. A few made comments about going soft, about charity work. Cole didn't flinch. He brought all his horses to Grant's forge now, requesting custom work for difficult animals. He watched Grant handle each one with that same patient precision, adapting his techniques to suit each horse's temperament and needs. After a month, Cole approached Grant with a different kind of proposal. I want to invest in expanding your operation, he said, standing in the forge while Grant worked. Take on more apprentices. Build a teaching forge. You've got something valuable here. Should be bigger. Grant set down his hammer, his expression cautious. I don't need rescue, Mr. Cole. This isn't rescue, sir, Cole said carefully. This is business. You've got expertise worth supporting. I've got capital seeking worthy investment. He gestured at James, working at his bench. You're training young men others wrote off. That matters. I want more of that to exist. Why? The question was direct, deserving a direct answer, because I was wrong, Cole said. And being wrong cost people, cost you business, cost young men opportunities. I can't undo 5 years of prejudice, but I can put my money where it might do some good now. Grant studied him in that patient way of his, seeing past surface words to underlying intention. This is about easing your conscience. Partly, Cole admitted, but it's also about you having the best forge operation in the territory. You've proven you can train people others won't touch, give you resources. You could train more. That's worth investing in. James looked up from his work, sensing the conversation's significance. Grant signed something to him. The young man signed back, his expression thoughtful. What's he saying? Cole asked, asking if you're serious about this, or if it's guilt talking. Grant's slight smile held no mockery, told him probably both, which doesn't make it less valuable if it's genuine. It's genuine, Cole said. I'll put it in writing. Partnership agreement. You run the operation however you see fit. I provide capital for expansion. Any profits get split fair. Grant was quiet for a long moment, the forge fire crackling behind him. I've got conditions, he finally said. Name them. You have to be public about this partnership, about why you're doing it. Grant's eyes were steady. Can't be a silent investor. Has to be visible. People need to see you change not just your mind, but your behavior. The condition hit its mark. Grant was asking Cole to make his transformation public, to let his support for the forge serve as testimony against his former prejudice. It was a harder ask than money. Money was easy. Public acknowledgement of error was costly, but it was fair. More than fair. Agreed, Cole said. I'll tell anyone who asks, and plenty who don't. They shook hands. Grant's twisted hand gripping firmly despite its unnatural angle, 2 hands different in form but equal in purpose, sealing an agreement built on changed understanding and mutual respect. One more thing, Grant added. You have to be prepared for people not to understand. Some folks won't like you partnering with a crippled blacksmith. They'll think you've lost your standards. Cole thought about that, about the social cost, the questions, the skepticism. Then he thought about 5 years of being confidently wrong, about miles wasted on pride, about young men delayed in finding purpose. Let them think what they want, he said. I know what I've learned. 6 months passed. Grant's forge expanded into the adjacent property, adding a teaching workshop where apprentices learned fundamentals before moving to the main forge. 4 young men worked there now. including James and two newer arrivals. One was a boy named Thomas who'd lost an arm in a ranching accident. The other was Martin, whose withered arm from childhood fever had kept him from finding skilled work. Both were learning ironwork adapted to their capabilities, both producing quality pieces under Grant's patient instruction. Cole's ranch displayed their work everywhere, custom gates crafted by James, fireplace tools by young Thomas, decorative hinges by Martin. When visitors commented on the quality, Cole told them exactly where it came from. "Grant's teaching forge," he'd say. "Best craftsmen in the territory. They train young men others won't touch. I'm proud to support them." Some visitors followed his recommendation. Grant's business grew organically. Word spreading about quality work and fair prices. The expanded workshop allowed him to take more commissions, to train more apprentices, to build the operation he'd planned before the accident derailed everything. Cole and Grant weren't friends. Exactly. Too much history stood between them. Too much that couldn't be undone or forgotten. But they were respectful colleagues. Cole brought his horses regularly, consulted Grant on ranch metalwork, referred other ranchers consistently. Grant appreciated the advocacy without needing personal closeness. The partnership worked because both men understood what it was: a correction, not a redemption. Cole couldn't redeem 5 years of prejudice. He could only stop adding to the damage and start supporting what should have been supported all along. On a cool spring morning, Cole stopped by the forge to pick up a commissioned piece. A young boy stood in the yard with his father, watching the apprentices work. The boy had a pronounced clubfoot, his gait awkward but determined. "Excuse me," the father said, approaching Grant. "My son wants to learn a trade. We've been to 3 different places. They all said—" He trailed off. "Uncomfortable. Said his foot makes him unsuitable." Grant finished gently. The father nodded, his expression pained. The boy stood straighter, trying to look capable despite his obvious disability. Grant limped over to them, his own stiff leg making his gait just as awkward. He crouched down to the boy's level, meeting his eyes directly. "Son," Grant said, "I'll teach you what I know. Your foot doesn't matter. Your willingness to learn does." The boy's face transformed, hope replacing resigned disappointment. His father's eyes glistened with relief and gratitude and something like shame. Cole recognized that shame. It looked familiar. "Thank you," the father said quietly. He glanced at Cole, recognition dawning. "You're Harrison Cole. You're the one who... I heard you used to..." "I used to be a fool," Cole said simply. "Then I learned better." The man nodded slowly. He'd been one who followed Cole's lead, avoiding Grant's forge because Cole did. Now his son was being given opportunity because Cole had finally changed. Cole collected his commissioned piece and prepared to leave. Grant was already explaining to the boy what apprenticeship would entail, what he'd learn, how they'd adapt techniques to work with his foot. The boy listened with fierce attention, and already imagining himself at the forge. James waved goodbye from his workbench, where he was creating another intricate piece for a client in Helena. Thomas practiced basic hammerwork under Martin's patient supervision. The teaching forge hummed with purposeful activity, with young men learning that limitation didn't mean uselessness. Cole mounted his horse and rode past the forge slowly, taking in the scene. Smoke rose from both chimneys now, the main forge and the teaching workshop. The ring of hammers created a steady rhythm. Apprentices learned while Grant moved between them, offering corrections and encouragement. This was what 6 months of changed behavior looked like. Not perfection, but progress. Not universal transformation, but growing awareness. One man's moral courage creating space for others' opportunities. The forge grew smaller behind him, but Cole didn't feel the old urge to look away. Instead, he felt something like peace. He'd been wrong, admitted it, and spent 6 months proving the admission wasn't empty. The work continued. The best iron, Grant always said, got tested by the hottest fire. Cole figured the same was true for men. Heat and pressure revealed what was truly there, burned away what was false, left behind something stronger and more honest. His testing wasn't over, probably never would be. But he was better for it. He rode toward his ranch, toward work waiting and choices to be made. Behind him, the The forge's smoke rose into clear spring sky. Young men learned their craft. Thomas Grant taught what pain had forced him to understand. And the community, slowly, began to heal. Not because one man found perfection, but because he'd found the courage to admit he'd been wrong. And then, harder still, to act like he meant it, every day after. That was what made the difference.